Hello, everybody. It's Chris Schmidt from Rocket Lasso, and welcome to Season 7, Episode 2 of Rocket Lasso Live. This time, we're going to be taking questions live from the chat, and I think we've got some stuff coming in already. So thank you very much, everybody. Remember, we can't do these live streams if people are not asking questions. Of course, I can just kind of make things up, but I'm looking to answer people's questions. And honestly, it does go to, it's even happened multiple times this week, where one of the main reasons to do this stream is I get a lot of people reaching out to me because of my tutorials and because of live streams saying like, oh, like, how would you do this? How would you do that? If I spend all day answering everybody's like tech supports or technical questions, I literally would have no time to do anything else. So I always say, it's like, oh, that's a good question. Try and hit me up during the live stream. So that is a big reason that we're here. So I don't want to just be making stuff as we go. But yeah. So hello, everybody on Twitch. Hello, everybody over here on YouTube. And let's see, Rune typed a question. Let's see what it says. Let's say you have 2 to 5 objects in a volume builder, each with different colors. Would it be possible to get these colors into the voxel mesher somehow? Actually, it's a good question, and I can genericize it a little bit to also be applicable even if you're not using voxel mesher. So yeah, we can do that one pretty quick. So where's my little menu? And click on the laptop. Let's see if my mouse wiggles. Yay. Okay. It linked properly this week. All right. So the question is, how can we turn something into voxels but still get colors from it? So let's go ahead and set it up. And we can keep this really straightforward. Actually, we'll make it a little more interesting by making it text. So let's make a mode text, or just the text object as they call it now. And I'll type in R, and let's make it, I'm gonna grab lemon milk or Arial. I just like the bigger, bolder ones. They look better as voxel. So yeah, I can grab Arial black. That also works. So I do that, and I'm gonna make art Kate, and we'll make the last one T just for rocket, and we'll scoot it over. So I've got 3 different objects, and in theory, we have 3 different colors that we're going to want to work from on each of them. So if we go and we throw this into a volume builder, drop them all in, plop it out. Now we get those, and now we throw that into a volume mesher, which of course is going to merge them into a single mesh. If I make this editable, it's one object. It doesn't explode them out as separate objects. So, of course, we can make all the standard changes, increase the resolution there if we want to, and we can inflate or deflate by dragging our voxel range slider. And now we want to colorize them somehow. And this could be that you just straight up want them to be like RGB, or it could be that you want a mask on one of the particular letters so that you can overlay a noise, whatever the case is. What I have been doing is we can right click and add a other and create a vertex color map, drop that on. And now in the simplest way possible, I can grab one of these letters, and let's rename these to R, K, and T. I could grab the letter R and drag it inside here and say I would like to view it as, say, a point object. And as soon as I do, you're going to see that it is kind of getting colorized. So selecting on that, we've got a couple different options here where we are viewing this object through the layer through this mode, and the current mode is point mode. So if I were to start increasing this, you can see I can increase it to the extent that it will turn entirely green. Now you saw already, if I push it too far, it's going to start infecting everything else. So a better method is clicking surface, and the instant I click surface, even if we have we don't need much of a radius, but if I go just up to maybe like 10 here, you see that entire thing got colorized. The important thing to note is surface is relatively slow to calculate as compared to point. Because yeah, this is doing all this crazy polygon stuff and checking like every possible point against the entire surface instead of just, is it near one of these particular points? And then you've got the volume, which I think in this case, actually, this case, it might not work because we're sort of outside the volume or just perfectly crossing it. But this one, volume, take even longer to calculate. But I'd say surface is kind of like the happy in between. So you can now see that this letter R, let's give ourselves a little extra room here. If I select the letter R and we go under color remap, here is the color it is. So I can just set this to any color I like. And, in theory, you could even do a gradient remap based on the fall off. But here we're just looking for solid colors. So now that I've got that letter, let's see if I can do this. I don't even know. Okay, so I've made a duplicate of that. So in theory, with all the updated settings, I change, and I'll replace it by dragging the letter K on top of it. And now I can colorize that to something else and then duplicate that again. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good workflow. Oop, I misclicked. Grab the last one, drop it on there, and colorize that to something else. So we're able to colorize those however we like. And the cool part here is it's all in the volume. So if I were to grab this and move it around, because we're moving the object, it's also moving the surface object that's being referenced. So it will update. Now, I know the next question is going to be, what happens if they start blending into each other and you actually kind of get this crossfade going? And it all depends on the settings and the order you put them in. Whichever one is coming, I think it layers up kind of like Photoshop. So the top layer is going to override. So the K is overriding the T. So if I were to grab the letter K, go back to layer and start increasing this radius, you see it's going to start infecting the neighbor as well. So keep that in mind depending on the way you want the fall off to work. And we could push it further. It's like we could do like calculations only on the outside or inside. That might speed it up a little bit, clipping the shape. Maybe that helps a little bit. But this is sort of my go-to. Maybe there's more specific ways. They're not immediately coming to mind if there would be one. And something I'd say is I do kind of like having the blending going on here. So if I wanted to blend even more, we could potentially give it a, does this have a fall? I imagine that this actually does have a fall off. So yeah, you see as I increase it, that there's actually sort of a gradient as it fades away. But if we want to keep it a little bit harsher, keep that pretty sharp, like just enough to get the entire letter K. And even that, I wonder if we could, like even here, you see, I keep on making the radius larger because you see this area is still a little bit darker. But if we went into the remapping, and let's say I grab my curve from that, if I were to grab this handle and start pulling it over, you can see that I'm not increasing the radius, but I am saying pretty much if you're within the radius and you're kind of like full power. So now my radius didn't increase, but now the entire thing is green. And then something I might do is, let's say we wanted to get a smoother blend. Let's say you're doing like liquidy blobs that are blobbing into each other. I might make a duplicate of that map. The very first thing you should always do is rename it. So even here, I'll just say vertex map color 2, or I'll just say blur. And now that we've got a second tag with a different name, if they have the same name, they get confused. They'll confuse each other. Like Cinema is trying to reference the tags by name, and that'll mess things up if you don't. So under the fields, I'll delete everything that we're inputting, and I'll just drag in the previous tag, and it's going to look identical because by default, it's coming in to just look at the nearest. Oh yeah, it's looking. What did I just do that made it not be colorized? Oh, I accidentally turned off fields there. Okay. Okay, anyway, I dragged in this new tag. As long as I have it selected, we can see it here in the viewport, and it's set to nearest. Now, technically, it would be even faster if you said index, because right now, each point is trying to find the equivalent nearest point on the other one, which is going to be more applicable more of the time. But because these are identical objects, because both tags are on the same object, it's actually faster to say index, because now it's just like 0.55 is saying, well, what color is 0.55? Now, if you do go to the nearest, though, there is actually no, not nearest, but if we say average, and average is essentially nearest, but it gets additional settings, we can now increase this radius. And as I do, these are blurring between each other. It's actually just blurring the final results. So I guess the green is a little overpowering on the blue, but technically this blue is fading into the green as much as the green is fading into the blue. And we can go back to the original thing and maybe change the color there to make it a little maybe more obvious. So if I grab this one, you can now see that definitely that blue is fading into the orange. So you can get even nicer crossfades from that as well. Everything is there still working. And if I were to grab this letter, you'll see that those are still blobbing very nicely into each other. Now, I guess maybe a side effect, but you'll see that there is a little bit of crossfade even before they touch. Not super great ways around that, but there you go. And that's because it's just based on like the radius. This is just based right here on the average value based on the radius. And I can't think of any way that would get around that specifically. Having said that, the question was more specifically about voxel mesher. So I want to make sure to just hit the specifics of that. And essentially it's the exact same technique. So let's see to what degree I can just transfer this. If I throw this into a voxel mesher, technically we could colorize these as like a surface, but what I'd prefer to do is change this to cube mode. And of course, Voxel Mesher is the new Rocket Lasso plugin. If I click convert to cloner, it's going to look identical, but now I'm generating a point cloud and we're cloning onto it. So now that we're in the world of clones, I should be able to do this exact same thing. I'll actually just steal the vertex map and move them directly onto my voxel mesher. So now it's actually not colorizing, the voxel mesher, but instead it should be colorizing this point cloud. Now we don't get feedback from that here in the viewport, but if I grab my cloner and we say make a plane effector, the plane effector will be renamed plane.color. And I'm going to say don't affect position, but yes, affect the field color. The field color will be based off of this tag. So here's the unblurred one. And now you can see that the colors got transferred directly into Voxel Mesher. So now each clone is getting perfectly colorized based on those fall offs. and I could grab this blurred one and drop that on top instead. And now you can see that we're getting the blurred version of that. So the exact same concept works. I'm just propagating it through the cloner system. And the reason I did it into the cloner system is if we, let me kind of turn off a bunch of that stuff. So now we're back to just the voxel mesher. If I was in cube mode, then now we get all of these cubes, but these cubes are just like geometry floating in space. And even though we can't really see it right now, like this is a full cube, that's a full cube. So there's technically two polygons that are like intersecting each other right there. And if the vertex map was trying to colorize this, it would colorize just this point here, and it would essentially blur. So every cube would be crossfading between 4, or I guess technically 8 different colors of all of its points. So by doing it per clone, we're making it so that they're solid colored. Technically, I'm trying to think. I mean, it's like if these already had like UV maps applied and we had textures applied to them, then Voxel Mesher could automatically take on those colors directly. But yeah, this is doing what I want. Let me make sure I'm in point mode. And yeah, that is properly transferring the colors for me directly. Let's give that a save. We'll jump up to episode 2, scene files. And let's save that as file 1A underscore voxel. Come on. Voxel Mesher. Close. And then color per object. Let me see if there's any follow-ups on that specific question, or if I successfully answered it, and then we'll move on to another one. But Rune did not reply. Oh, wait, okay, no, it seems Rune did reply, and it seemed like we had it covered. Now, typically, I'm going to jump back and forth between Twitch and YouTube. I do see we have several questions in both, and I appreciate those questions. I'll say, as I always do, if the chat continues chatting back and forth, and then the chat moves on, and I'm jumping to a new question, feel free to repost your question again. Just don't spam it. If you spam it, then not only might you get blocked by a moderator, but I'm going to now avoid your question. And yeah, Sage, I am just tackling general questions from the audience this time. Oh, okay. Sage is saying, out of curiosity, maybe try doing some rolling clouds. And we've got a link to YouTube. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm gonna try, and I don't want to get copyright. Ooh, I don't know that I'm gonna be able to do much here. I'm gonna switch my screen to this. And so here's Freddie McKinney, the Majestic Supercell time lapse, and I'm gonna hit play. And essentially, we just got like amazing cloud formation as everything's sort of rolling and moving along. So, that's, I mean, essentially, this is really advanced simulation stuff. Like, this is crazy high, obviously this is real, but this would be crazy high end, essentially Pyro simulation. And like, this is clearly dealing a lot with things that that are not necessarily built into cinema. Like, there's particular like warmth in certain areas and like a certain amount of moisture in one area. And once the temperature drops because like a warm front hits a cold front, then the different, like, I mean, I know a decent amount of stuff about that type of thing, but let me go back to the laptop. But yeah, it's like if a warm air can hold more water than cold air. So when a warm front hits a cold front, suddenly the temperature's dropping and the warm air cannot hold all the moisture anymore. And generally speaking, you're going to see more particulate in the air. You're going to see more water vapor kind of condense up to make the clouds. And then once it's enough, it'll just start falling out of the clouds as rain. So like, that's the reality of what's happening. Now, all that roiling and everything that we're seeing there, like for the most part, to me, just starts turning into like straight up regular Pyro. So, we're not shy away from like jumping into something we don't fully understand or even have a method to, but let's just do a little exploring. I'm planning a tutorial that I think is going to be kind of cool. And in the tutorial, I needed a cloud, and I want to generate a cloud, and I wanted to be able to clone the cloud, which is surprisingly difficult. Let me see. I lost the chat. Oh, that's because I dragged it to the other window. So anyway, I was playing a little bit with some cloud stuff recently, and if anybody has like a specific better method, feel free to throw it out because I would be curious. But let's start out with some super basics. In fact, here's what I did in the practice run I was doing. Let's go to clear out the search, move into Get rid of that. Go to the regular asset browser. And I'm just going to go to models and search for the word cloud. This is a little bit of a cheat. We could definitely model this out. But I'm just going to see, it's like, okay, which one of these clouds is kind of approximating what I want? And here's like a low poly cloud. And it's like, okay, that's kind of the shape of a cloud I want. So T for scale, scale it out a little bit extra wide, throw that into a subdivision surface. And it's like, okay, we've kind of faked the baseline like look of a cloud. I might even push that a little bit further if I were inclined. So I could do this via a plane effector, drop this after. So it is affecting the subdivided mesh. And I'll say, yes, I would like to, with this plane, I'll call it plane.deform. Deform. And under deform, say deform the points. You see the entire thing is getting all kind of crazy inflated. I'll say not on Y, don't move on Y, but yes, move on Z. And you see it will inflate or deflate the entire thing. So I'll say yes, inflate the entire thing. And then we can put in a random field. And now thanks to the random field, we can crank this up and essentially I can add additional variation here. So now we've got essentially we've built out a little rig so we can make this cloud as kind of puffy as we want to. And I can also, if I want to make more than one, I can just keep changing this random seed. And generally speaking, it's still the original same basic shape, but we were able to get here really quickly and I can get a little bit of variation from that. So pleased with that as far as a basic shape. So now, and because we're going to be using a bunch of Pyro, which is potentially very slow, or potentially I'll hit like all sorts of RAM limits and whatnot. We are on a laptop here after all. Let's say Pyro rolling clouds. So let's talk about a couple of basics here. And that's mostly going to be that I want to generate Pyro from here. So we'll grab our final mesh here. I don't need to subdivide anymore. Like Pyro's fairly blurry as it goes. So right click on the object, let's say simulation. We'll add a Pyro emitter. And then I want to emit from the volume, not the surface. And actually there is the sparse volume that actually calculates faster. And as I couldn't, when I was doing my what's new video for it, I could not tell a visual difference. And yes, we want density. No, I want no temperature. So there's no fire. And we're going to definitely be using some noise. And we can be constantly adding density. And actually, I'm not even sure about this. If we set the density, actually, we should do this as an experiment. I'm going to set the density to 1 and keyframe it. There's probably, is there a timing setting here? Maybe not. I'm just going to keyframe it. So we're going to make a keyframe here. I'm going to say, yeah, over 1 frame, that's the density. And then next keyframe, it's at 0. Now, let's hide the original geometry. And essentially nothing should be happening because there's not really any wind or anything. It might drift a little bit, but mostly I expect it just to fade. So now if I play, yeah, you see it just fades out. So essentially it doesn't continue existing forever. So, and generally speaking, we do want it to be constantly fading out. But you'll see, so essentially it just taught me something. It's like set is constantly saying, here's the amount you are being given right now, always, no matter what. So we do need to be continuously adding more density into that. Now you see here, and this is what's kind of interesting, is density, a little teeny little bit of density goes a really long way. So let's make a redshift light, scoot this off to the side, and make a material. So let's say create materials, and of course it's all in the context of redshift. They have a Pyro volume, so pretty much that is ready for me to drop directly onto, I think, the Pyro object. And even here on the Pyro object, I'm going to say that the temperature is off because we don't have any, and I don't think I need the velocity being exported. So in theory, I don't know, I could miss an important detail here, but in theory, if I hit render, we should now be getting that visualized, hopefully. Yep. Okay, cool. So now you see it's visualized. Let's make sure that our cloud is not rendering. And yeah, now you can see that this thing is super duper duper crazy dense. Now, I don't know if it's better to do this in Pyro, or if it's better to do it in the material, or some combination of the two. But just to show you, because it's the system that we're using, if I go back into my Pyro tag, right now you see I'm setting the density to 1, but I'm going to drop that to 0.1. Remember, I always like doing this as like an order of magnitude. So we're dropping that to 1/10 the amount. We'll let that run for a second. And now you can see that we're only generating 1/10 of the amount. And that's still a pretty dang solid looking cloud. So just to get a baseline here, let's say 0.01 and run that again. And you can see now we're getting kind of like a thin, wispy cloud. So for our purposes, I think constantly setting the density to 0.1 is kind of getting us what we want for the basics. That looks like a nice, fluffy cloud that is solid enough. So, without now I'm trying to think of the behavior, because I'm not often like art directing the stuff animating, but essentially I feel like we're probably going to want some sort of vorticity, or, and this might not actually be the definition of vorticity, but, and someone correct me, but if it's kind of like, oh, is the cloud affecting itself? Would the fire that wants to rise up, that would churn up the smoke? So in theory, we could generate the fire, which will be more calculation, but we could say, don't render the fire, like just make it. But I do have a question of scale here. Obviously, the detail of that gigantic cloud is like enormous. So I'm kind of inclined right now that let's just tinker with this little puffy cloud right now and see what types of things we can get from it. So we're constantly generating more cloud. I'm thinking let's get some wispiness going here. So, or let's even, actually, I just want to see what this looks like. I will make a forces turbulence. So like the most straightforward noise. It's a big 3-dimensional noise. Think of it like a cloud of noise for X, a different cloud of noise for Y, a different cloud of noise for Z. It's kind of blowing in each direction. And we set the scale. And you can think of it, even though this is set that says scale, these are actually real world units. So if it says 100%, it actually means 100 centimeters. So I think there's a relatively large cloud. I'm not sure. I'll make a figure just to get a visual. Actually, it's not very big. So yeah, so this turbulence will be relatively large, but I want to see it super blatantly and really quickly. So let's just, I'm gonna hit save and let's hit play. And yeah, you can see that this noise is very quickly blowing the stuff around. But you can also see that we're constantly generating new cloud. So we've always got that solid voxel in the center. And all these are wisping and drifting away very quickly. So I like the look of it, but this doesn't, what's the right way of saying this? You see, we're getting all this lovely wispiness where these are blowing around. And of course, we could slow down the noise and make it not so intense and whatnot. But it's like, okay, now we've added all this nice variety. And actually, I would do this, that if I wanted to make a fluffy cloud, I would also run a few frames of turbulence on there. So now you can see I've got like all these little imperfections and wispiness on the edge, which is really fun. So yeah, now we got this wispy cloud. And actually, I just saw Stud Frame just said that it's like, oh, you need to play around with Pyro, and I totally agree. And here's a recent thing I learned, because I was trying. What I wanted to do was generate a scene. Actually, I'll give you a little preview because I think it looks kind of cool. I'll pop open this one, and this is part of a tutorial. Actually, there's the reference image I'm looking at. So essentially, that's what I'm trying to make, and I want to make these wisps. So it's going to take a second to load because I got like a ton of clones in here. So you can see I've got all of this, but it's like the idea of art directing Pyro at this scale was insane. So I was like, I want to make one cloud or maybe a couple clouds and then start cloning them around. And I'll just pop open the Redshift so you can just see a quick version, which I think is not horrible. The point of the tutorial is not making this beautiful landscape. It's some specific aspect of it. And the clouds are kind of a bonus. It's just funny. The question was similar to something I've been tinkering with lately. But what's really cool is essentially the technique I just showed you is how I made a single cloud. And now I'm cloning like, I don't know, like 300 of them around, and they're all getting scaled and rotated. So you'll never be able to tell that that's only one cloud. And even if you could make like, 2 or 3 variations of it, and that's going to be like impossible to tell. But you see, I'm kind of getting those like little drifts where you get the little layers of separation and then layer of cloud, layer of separation. So I'm quite pleased with the way that ends up looking overall. So let's kill that and turn that off. And yeah, it's like rotating the camera here would be insane. So somebody's saying it would kill your computer. I am using multi-instance, and then this is one of the situations where I would go and turn off my cloner, and now you can see just all the fog, and I go and turn off my other cloner, and now I'd work on the scene. So now I can rotate my camera around. But in other situations, that would be like absurd. Anyway, you'll see here that I have a Pyro object as my output because I wanted to simplify, and essentially I wanted to model a single cloud. And the way you would do that is actually really straightforward. I would just kind of do that and be like, boom, that's my cloud. And then all you have to do is grab your Pyro object, and you see I turned off those other elements. And now I can just say make editable. Density on. Yeah. Okay. You turn on the density. And now when I made this editable, we get this Pyro object, and it's linking to density. And this is the only way I found that you could actually clone it, because you can actually I'm going to select density and detach it. Most people probably haven't done this. I haven't really done it. But you can see I got to actually output my density as a separate channel here. And now it's a standalone object. I didn't require my Pyro output, but the textures get confused on this, and you're not able to clone the standalone density. But if I hit undo, maybe it will return, maybe it won't. That seems like, okay, I was able to do it. If the density is here inside of a Pyro output, you can clone this. So just a little tidbit for people. That will probably be in the tutorial as well. Anyway, yeah, this is now a Pyro object, an output that I could save and clone and do whatever I want with. Undo a few times. Let's get our live version back again. And cool. And let me think. Okay, so yeah, so we saw this is good, but the next step, and here's where I'm going to get quite lost quite quickly, is the turbulence is not vorticity to the, like I said, I might be using the word wrong, but like essentially it doesn't care where the density is. It doesn't where some of the cloud is. It's just blowing wind in certain spots and it's drifting it around. So it's not super reactive, where if we go back to our reference, which is no trivial thing because I got to switch to the other computer, and I didn't close, but I minimize the window. Boop, ba-doop, ba-doop, and boom. You'll see that as these are moving, that there's a lot of very distinct things going on. Where it's like new stuff is being generated, other ones are fading out as they move a certain distance. It feels like this almost like static piece of cloud, almost like a piece of geometry is spinning around slowly, like having proper structure. So you can see, I guess it doesn't scrub for me very well like that, but like this bottom part's barely changing, but these upper parts are changing a lot. And it feels like everything is affecting everything else. So there are a lot of layers of crazy stuff going on in there. Now, so like I said, I'm going to turn off the turbulence, and I don't think aerodynamic wind and all that, none of that means anything in the context of Pyro. Now, Pyro itself does have a ton of crazy settings. If I go to the Pyro scene, twirl this down, go to Pyro, here's where we get the real meat of the settings for Pyro. This is like the overall behaviors. Yeah, essentially, yeah, this is a good way of thinking of this is the Pyro scene here's how the fire and the smoke and all those things behave. And then the actual tag, this is just making it. This is saying, okay, I'm spitting out density or I'm spitting out temperature, but this is the behavior. Now, inside of the behavior, yeah, we've got all sorts of things like the buoyancy. So this is like, does it want to travel up? Does it want to travel down? So right now, given what we're doing, I'm going to say, well, the density doesn't care. It's not trying to go anywhere in particular. And then we have vorticity strength. And here's where it's like, I don't even... Vorticity is, I think it is where it's where the fire feels like it's affecting itself. Source. Yeah, so here we can, okay, I'm going to say the vorticity, I'm going to make the vorticity strong and say that it's actually referencing the density. Oh, and there's a source strength. I have not played with the settings, so let's see what happens. I can put that in there. So essentially, yeah, nothing's happening. I still see nothing. Source strength, let's try 1. See nothing. Let's try 11. Still see nothing. 111. We're just going to see if we can get to do something. All right, still nothing. I'm going to put 2 more because we're not seeing anything. All right, so we're not seeing anything there. This setting might not need to be changed. Vorticity strength. Let's try cranking that up crazy high. This is just wind, so it's not like we're generating more. Okay, so that's not directly doing anything. I imagine we need some sort of inherent movement. So I'm going to actually set that to none. So in theory, that's doing nothing. Maybe we come back to it. Now we've got our turbulence, and there is, like, we're spatially smoothing, there is strength, and then, yeah, so here's turbulence and a strength. So in theory, there is some, but right now the source is none. And you see, as far as I can tell, nothing is happening. let's try setting that to density. We do have density, but keep in mind, we have a very, very thin density, which is maybe another problem. So immediately I'm going to jump that to a relatively large number, see if we see something. Still see nothing. But keep in mind, our density is very thin. We're only generating 0.1 density. So let's put 2 more 5s on there. I just want to see if we can see something. Still nothing, unfortunately. Frequency, noise, octaves. I kind of would have thought we'd seen something here, but it's settings I haven't used, so I'm probably just missing. I'm definitely going to be missing something. So that's saying it's based off the density. We could say based off the pressure. I'm kind of curious what that will do. Still nothing. We are not outputting the pressure, though. We should remember, or maybe that's velocity. And actually, I'm going to turn on export, and here's the density. So I'm going to turn on that. So maybe we need those bits of data calculating. I don't know. I've used Pyro a bunch, but there's just so many dang settings. It's like I just don't know what might be being used in one spot or another. So pressure still seems not to be doing anything. I'll turn density back on because maybe now it's outputting in some way. Nope, still kind of nothing. Scale with velocity is turned on, but right now it's not moving. So let's turn off scale with velocity. So it's treating it more absolute. Oh, suddenly it is moving. Okay, so we just learned a little something. We've got these huge numbers and nothing was happening because we've had this multiplier that's saying scale with velocity, but it's not moving. So if it's not moving, it's multiplying by 0. So, okay, now we saw something happen that we turned off scale with velocity. Let's go and reset these back to something a little bit more normal. In fact, I'm going to set this to none. So now, does it do anything by itself? Oh, it did. It's, oh, this vorticity is still on. Maybe those are doing something. I gotta reset those. Okay, it seems like that this vorticity was dependent also on something already moving a little bit. Interesting. So yeah, let's start adding up our knowledge here. Now you can see that we're getting, I said don't multiply by velocity. So now you can see that we're definitely getting some movement by itself. Give myself some more frames. And yeah, so we get this kind of nice drifting going. These are all defaults, but usually the speed would be low. So in theory, that means that when that turbulence was running, it was a very strong turbulence, but it was maybe trying to get some like vorticity type stuff going. Maybe, I don't know. Let's turn that off. I'm going to say 0 strength and see if that's the actual movement we saw. And yes, this is generating that movement. Now let's try putting that vorticity back in again. But I'm still kind of thinking that might not do anything. Yeah, that one's still not doing anything. It did something when other things layered up on top of it. But let's go back and play with this. Yes, that by itself does do something. I'm going to say base your stuff off of the existing density here. So maybe there'll be a bit of a feedback loop. Source strength, let's try putting numbers in here and just see if we can see a visual difference. The problem with this type of thing is it can be incredibly subtle. And not even on top of that, this is turbulence. And you'll see down here, there's a bunch of noise settings. So this could be like blowing stuff around, but it's based on a really tiny noise maybe. So you can see we got all these octaves and strength and frequency. And frequency is typically sort of a scale, or yeah, frequency is going to probably be sort of a scale, but there's also the initial octave scale. That's going to be the main setting. So I'm going to say make it 10 times larger. And let's see what we get. Okay, now you see, we can actually see the noise a little more coherently. You see this whole thing is blowing up in one particular direction, and it's blowing in the other direction as that noise moves around. So let's drop that to 1/4 of the size. So now we should start seeing a bit of twisty coherence there. So it's kind of like we're using a more advanced turbulence that's built directly into the Pyro, and those things are drifting around. Now, we have this vorticity here, and I just don't know like if we're going to be getting this sort of like roiling like reactive type stuff. So I really now I'm just playing around. I'm just tweaking settings, see what types of things we get. Now see okay, already to me this feels more reactive. Turbulence doesn't do that. You see how it kind of look, see how like the wave kind of feels like it's pushing the rest of the wave away. So this is more of the type of thing we're talking about. Now I'm putting big numbers in here so that we can actually see them. But yeah, now I'm seeing this cloud of density and it feels like it's reacting. Like that feels more reactive than turbulence did. So yeah, I feel like we're sort of in the ballpark. So we've got this really large noise. I do like the scale of the noise. It's kind of what I was going for. But it's blowing really, really fast and really far away. I can lower that down. So now you kind of get this maybe a little bit more. I mean, it's still quite strong. And it goes, yeah, there's so many settings here. Like we can crank up the source strength, and then is this the reactiveness? Maybe, maybe not. And you always have to, like, I can keep on cranking this number up and being like, oh, I feel like it's doing something. Oh, and clearly if I crank it up enough, it is doing something. So we can know that for a fact, at least. So, okay, still too much. 500. So now it's not exploding anymore. So now we see, okay, in theory, this is doing quite a bit, but I don't know what it's doing. So let's turn it off and let's see how it feels and how it looks different. And yeah, definitely when that is on, it feels like it's breaking it apart a little bit more. But now that I look at it off, I kind of like the way it looks with it off as well. So that's a bit tricky. Scale with velocity, like this might actually become relevant now, where it's like as it moves faster, it's seeing different types of scale on it. But right now, let's see again, it's almost like we need to have that off and then we can turn it on and let's see. Whoa, look at that. Okay, interesting. That's interesting. Okay, we do have some relatively strong numbers here. And when there's no velocity, it can't react because nothing's moving. But if we turn on the scale and there was already a little bit of movement, suddenly it can react to that movement. And now we're getting seemingly like this feedback loop where a little bit of movement makes more movement, makes more movement, makes more movement. So we got this crazy high source strength. But if I lower that down and if I start over, you see we get nothing, let it move a little bit and turn this on. Now we're in theory we're getting these feedback loops a little bit, and then maybe every once in a while we get these like explosions, which is kind of interesting. But if we were to turn on the turbulence, which is quite strong, but if we make that like a relatively reasonable turbulence, then it's constantly putting in some velocity. So my hope would be, yeah, here at the beginning I didn't need to trigger it because now the turbulence is always giving us a little baseline wind blowing around, and now we've got all these reactive twists and turns. And I haven't even scrolled down at all yet inside the Pyro settings. Like if we actually start looking at like all of the crazy settings that we can get to as we go further, look, rest and density and color and temperature, fuel, velocity, advanced settings. Like there are so many settings to play with here, and all of these could affect so many different things inside of Pyro. Now, having said that, I do feel like we're this is the type of movement I was looking for. It's very chaotic, it's very random, but in the cloud, it sort of looked like it was as well. We are using this turbulence noise here, which we don't, well, we actually have a good amount of layering up, but like that's not controlling the direction that's blowing. It's just noise based and random. So if we wanted a general upward motion, then we'd make a wind, just like a wind force from here and have it blow up, generally speaking, and it would go up. Now, these are drifting away really far. A lot of this will probably just turn into like lowering the strength down to more reasonable numbers. We have to keep in mind now that there are several things layered up on top of each other, and it does seem like it's taking a second to kind of get started. Actually, that's interesting. Like with a low turbulence strength that is set to scale with velocity, it doesn't ever feel like it's really getting off the ground. So does this mean we need more initial turbulence to kind of perturb it more? I'm going to go too far maybe. So that's turbulence, and that feels like turbulence. Although, you know, there's still that vorticity layering up on top of it. How far? Okay, so that's enough to do that. So yeah, we had to, well, not quite enough to get like a bunch of motion. Very, very interesting. Yeah. I mean, it goes to, I'm making a decent amount of turbulence here at this point. And you can definitely feel the smoke kind of reacting against itself a little bit, but we're just not getting those big kicks that we are getting here. So I am going to increase our turbulence again on there. Let these start drifting around. And yeah, those look, essentially I wanted what we had before, but a little calmer. And now these are calmer. In fact, if you kind of go think back to the reference, because I don't want to keep swapping over to it. It was kind of like wispy in certain areas. So if you think of this as like a smaller section, a smaller bit of structure, and I don't know how far we're going to push this. I don't, because we could spend like literally the whole stream and feel like we're only like a tenth of the way there. But if you imagine that's like, oh, that big giant cloud of height bias, height. So, you know, this is roughly pretending that's the cloud. Imagine that the scale of our Pyro, but this is the size of the entire cloud. And now if you think of this as the wispiness that's drifting off of there, I feel like we're sort of in the ballpark of the type of thing I was thinking. Now, a couple of things I want to do. Right now, we're really harshly seeing this voxel in the center, which I think would translate, and we don't want that. Now, I don't know for sure, but I think there is a setting that will help us there. So we got the sparse volume, but then we have emission fall off. And this might, and I say might, fall off on the edges. So let's restart that. Is that softer? I don't know. Let's say 500. Huge hiccup there. It's taking a while to initialize. I imagine it's doing a bunch of crazy depth calculations, but actually that's not, I feel like it almost does make it look a little bit better, but it's not doing what I wanted it to. How do we have it add in lighter? I mean, is there, we could increase the resolution obviously, but then you're just dramatically increasing your calculation time. I'm just trying to think of a way that this density could be a little like fuzzier. And I wanted to do it via falling off. We've got these noises. That's fine, but that's not helping specifically. Also, keep in mind, sometimes you might want to turn off the noise. If I turn off this noise, there's just going to be full density everywhere. And actually, yeah, you see immediately that all this stuff feels denser and there's just more cloud to drift around. And that's because essentially Pyro is trying to make a big cloud of density, and this noise is erasing out certain areas of it. So by turning off the noise, we're saying, well, you've now made more density. I really want these to like fade in, but I don't know of a way of doing that. Maybe in the material we could like remap it to show it dense and then less dense as it goes. I'm going to just click regular volume. I don't think it's going to look any different. And I'll say, like, I'm kind of worrying about it, but it could be that when that renders, it looks fine. So let's give that a second, and then let's just see what the render looks like. I want to see how much of this, like, the voxel, like this voxel-like effect, is going to do anything to us. Oh, actually, yeah, it's not showing up in the render because essentially everything is, even though I kept on saying how dense the density is here, we do have to see, I don't know how many we're seeing through here, but like right here, maybe we're looking through like 20 voxels, 20 different voxels worth of volume. And so each one's only contributing like 10%. So we're not really seeing much in the way of stepping here, maybe a little bit. And to me, the best way to get rid of that is just increase your resolution. Like if you double the number of steps, then you'll half the amount of banding you're seeing. Yeah, looking back at Twitch chat, I do agree that if you put temperature in, that's going to be flinging up the heat, which is going to make everything twist. We're seeing how far we could go with just doing the density, which was further than I thought we would. Now putting in the heat will put like all this rising stuff in there, but I don't know how much further I want to go. Like at a certain point, it's like we can only push this stuff so far until like even the laptop is going to not be happy. I'm quite pleased with how quick everything's been running here. And we are getting sort of this roiling, but you see the principles I'm trying to apply to it. So, and then it's more important for people to understand kind of the buttons to push. Like, what does which button do? How do we, like, you just saw me pretty much real time be like, I have an idea of what some of these things do, but moving into this and looking at it, it's like, okay, well, like here's vorticity, like, oh, that's what makes stuff look twisty, let's play with that setting. Like, oh, here's turbulence, the built-in turbulence, and as we played with those settings, we started getting some results. So more than us specifically making like that big giant twisting storm, doing this type of thing, so that, because it's one person's going to want to make a tornado, another person's going to make a thunderstorm, another person's going to want wispy clouds. I wanted to make mist in the mountains, and you can't make a tutorial for every single one of those things. So it more turns into what are the principles that we're pursuing in order to make that end result. Now, let's just see how this renders. Like, it seems to be rendering relatively quickly. So let's throw this out as all frames, redshift, advanced, 0.5, we'll say. The resolution's relatively low and reasonable. So let's just let it do a few frames and see what we can get it to look like. So you see in the very beginning, we are seeing some of that banding going. But as the vorticity and the turbulence layer up a little bit, that's going to get a little bit more hidden. And even right now, that's, well, I guess it just goes to the density you want to see in the fluffiness of it. Now, I did have one thought, and I don't know if it would work, but in the material, it's like, here is the scatter. We're looking at the density. scatter coefficient, and then we're also going to have other things like the absorption. So I almost feel like it would be the absorption channel, which is, I think, trying to look at color. Maybe that's more of a color channel. I don't know. But a thought I have, and I don't know if it's a good one, and I guess we could stop this render, but now we'd lose a few frames of rendering. But you can already see that start to drift around and do its thing. And you see as soon as it moves, it does hide the faceting quite well. But anyway, I'm not going to let that render for too long. I just want to see how it looked. And it's rendering relatively quickly there, so I'm pleased with that. But here's my thought is, I just don't know what setting is doing it. So maybe the scatter, maybe the absorption. But if we say here, and I don't even know which side is which. So it's like, is this where it's like really thick and this is where it's really faded out? So let's say that the more white, the more faded out it is. If I were to pull this in just a little bit and then put the color white there, that would kind of mean when it's at its most dense, it's invisible. And then as it gets a little bit more wispy, we'll see it. So the goal there would be, we've got this giant voxel grid of noise that's going to start drifting around. When it's at its most dense, meaning looking the most like little cubes, we don't see it. But as soon as it starts moving and drifting away, suddenly it becomes more opaque. So it's almost like it would be constantly fading in. So that potentially could do a little something for us. I'm pretty much going to stop the render here, and we'll just see if we can do a little bit of stuff with that density. But you can see, yeah, we got these wisps going, and yeah, I definitely, this has got vorticity vibes to it instead of just turbulence. So yeah, I dig it. So we'll kill that. And yeah, so let's yoink that out and just see if we can fiddle with the knobs here and get this to do something. And maybe it won't, but let's just try dragging this way up. And okay, thank you. Go away, Discord. No, I have to figure. It's one of those things where Windows says Discord is not open, but it's still running. So, okay. So as I drag this up, you see everything disappeared. Sort of. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. So, oh wow. Okay, a light touch goes a long way here. So you see, this is catching some of that faded out stuff, and if I start cropping it out, we're cropped into just like the super dense stuff. So is my theory right? If we scoot that over a little bit and then I steal the color white over there, okay, that's maybe kind of the opposite of what I want. So does that mean I'm gonna start scooting the white over here? And yeah, you see that's fading it out, and we're left with only the densest area. So that makes me think my theory is correct. But if we pull that up and then we fade it out, how far can we push that? Because it seems like almost all the density is there initially. So yeah, maybe there's just kind of limitations on how far we can push that. Now that was trying to do the absorption, which I feel like is the right setting, but just because I don't know, let's go to our scatter and do a similar thing. So I'm gonna scoot this up, and actually the scatter is doing, yeah, that's doing something similar. So let's just see what happens if I do that. Interesting. Let's try doing the opposite. I'm going to try putting this really dark one over there. Okay. Let's see. If I do this and I do that, essentially, if I push this far enough, do we get what looks like a hollow void inside? It's hard to tell, but I feel like it might be. I feel like it might be. So is that the trick? So let's go back to frame 0. Actually, well, not frame 0, but yeah, frame 1. So now we get all this very, let's just step through. So get rid of that. So we're seeing very voxel. It hasn't drifted yet, so I feel like we need to, I will let it drift a little bit, which is kind of where we're at. But let's see, where's a bad area? You see it's a bad example. I see some of the stepping, some of the stripes here, but it's very subtle. So it's gonna be hard to like A/B test. Yoink. So Okay. I feel like I am seeing slightly less stepping there. How far? It's so hard to tell. I can do some A/B renders here. I'm just trying to push it really far so we can tell more blatantly. Or is it just turning like more white here? I don't know. Let's send that to the picture viewer, and then let's yoink that out, and then see, yeah, yoinking out the black band there doesn't look much different. So let's hit picture viewer. Whoa there. Boop, boop. Okay, I literally don't see a difference between the two. So that black band isn't doing anything. So the reason I did that is now I know that all I was doing was increasing the density. So I think the little parts that were fading out, the little fade out bits, I was making them more opaque. So that just meant that they're hiding the banding more because yeah, we're making the wispy parts denser, and the wispy parts by definition are showing less of the voxel. So yeah, as I push this up, we're just showing more and more of the density. And if we were to crank this like all the way, I think we would, yeah, we'd start seeing the voxel effect on the edges again, because now we've made the wispy parts so dense that they're kind of doing that same thing. But that does feel a little bit odd to me, because I feel like if we were doing this, that in theory, to me, that means we are now erasing out the really, well, that would be erasing out the really wispy ones, right? So yeah, it's on the inside. Yeah, I don't know. This was an experiment, and I don't feel like it's really getting us anywhere, because there, like, that just made them even more dense. So like, it's almost like, that's interesting. Is this just a case of, I don't know what it is a case of. Yeah, that's a theory. Maybe somebody will know better than I, but that's all that I've got. Um, Checking the chat, seeing if there's any specific follow questions on this. Um, let's see. Badger, good to be back. Somebody saying they missed Turbulence FD. Doesn't Turbulence FD still work for cinema? I never personally used it, but as far as I know, it like never went away. So yes, there's a new built-in system inside of cinema, but I think you still got Turbulence. Anyway, I'm going to save this file here. If you're supporting on Patreon, you should be getting access to these files. But let's tackle the next question. Let's see. Demi, or Demi's Art, is asking a question. I'm not sure if you're still here because it was a little bit earlier. But you're asking about if you can make the catenary effect dynamic, each droop acting independently and have immediate hanging points fixed. So that's a fine question. And is it it could be very non-trivial. Now, I don't know for sure, but when you say, is it possible to make the catenary effect dynamic, I'm assuming you mean the Rocket Lasso catenary modifier. And I'm going to end up repeating this a lot. So if you're a regular, brace yourself, because I'm going to be saying often, because I know that there's a lot of confusion. I know for a fact there's a lot of confusion. But inside of Cinema 4D 2025.2, Maxon went and made a whole bunch of, I got to turn something off for a second here. Boop. Wait, is that the right one? Yeah. Maxon went and made a whole bunch of the Rocket Lasso modifiers, or the Rocket Lasso capsules, available to just C4D subscribers. So if I scroll down, you can see that tons of people are going to have access to branch spline modifier, break spline, catenary, the new constellation, dash spline, electric, the graph, the grid, not Ivy. Yes, partition. We could do a whole episode just talking about like partition, pulse spline, stairs, trim, weave, or wave, and then also it looks like Weave is available to everybody, which is cool. I didn't realize it would be. Anyway, right now, if you get the newest version of Cinema, you should have these now. And I've got a bunch of different example files. One of these is the Catenary spline modifier. So what is a Catenary spline modifier? It is what's a good way of showing this? There's a new line primitive, by the way. So I'm going to make this line, center it, and you see I've just got this line here. If I were to grab a Catenary spline modifier and drop it as a child, you're going to see it's going to take that line and make it look like a droopy line. So it's kind of fun as a singular modifier. And this can be pushed a lot further, and it can do quite a few different things, especially if we start combining it with other modifiers. So for instance, there is another modifier. That's annoying. It just got rid of my search again. There. There's a break spline modifier. So I'm going to put that in first, and you'll see that it kind of looks like it's making a dashed line, but it's making different breaks at different points for like lots of different reasons. So right now it said make a count of 10. We could say a set length or a certain percentage, an angle. So right now I'm just subdividing every certain distance. And we can do things like add randomness in. So we have like short ones and long ones. Let's make there be fewer, and we got lots of randomness. So now we've got a spline, a spline, a spline segment. If I reactivate my catenary, we get 3 different ones. If we grab our break spline, I could set this to like random mode here. And if I hit play, those are actually animated. You'll see that just those little breaks are drifting around, which now means my catenary, those are drifting around. So, it's generating all these different like hanging lines, and each tool has its own settings. Break spline has its own settings. Sag has its own settings. So you say droop down a little bit. We could go negative. We could go beyond the bar and have them droop way down. There's lots of cool techniques. I've got an entire video on Cineversity on how to use both of these tools. Now, the question seemed to be, could we make this catenary a rope simulation? And the question goes to, can we do that parametrically? And I don't know. At a glance, I'm thinking we can't, because maybe we can. And maybe the catenary will enable this, because essentially what we need to do is parametrically say that these endpoints can't move. But there's no selection. There's no parametric selection that we can do. And to my knowledge, there's no node or capsule that says, hey, just grab the endpoints. Now, I have ways I could fake it, but I don't know that those would even really work on like a spline. I guess we could do that as an experiment. So let's turn off those modifiers, and let's even see if this is possible. So it's gonna be a little bit wacky. I'm gonna say, give me a select. I usually do this on polygons, so we'll have to see what this does. I'll say select, and I'll yank these out entirely just so you know that those aren't doing anything. So we have this select, and I'm going to say select all points. And you see now we are getting this visual where they are, well, it's there. It's selecting all of them. So now a trick I often do, actually, let me show you what I'm doing. Oh, and this probably doesn't have any subdivisions. I'm going to give this a point count of 50. So here's what let me show you. If I make this editable, you'll see I've got all these points. So here's what my plan is. I don't know if it'll work. I'm essentially saying select all, and then I'm going to say shrink. So UK, and now you see that I shrunk my selection, meaning the endpoints are not selected. If I then invert my selection, UI, I've only got the endpoints. So that is the plan. I'm going to try and parametrically do that. So first step, select all of the points. Next step, shrink my selection. So there's a shrink selection. I don't know if this works on a spline. Shrink selection, points. So it's going to shrink by 1 step. And now I'm going to say invert, and we've got our invert selection right there. So let's invert after we've done that. So in theory, I've now selected these outer points. Unfortunately, there's no way of seeing it in the viewport, that what we've done. Now, again, I do not know if this will work, but let's make I'm going to search for the word selection. And we're looking this time for, what's it called? Not select, store selection. That's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to say store selection, and I'm going to say I want to store a point, and the name of it will be ends. And it did make a tag. That's encouraging. And the selection string, I think if it's empty, it's default, but pretty much I'm just going to say default. And that means like whatever the incoming thing is. So if I make that editable, nope, if I make it editable, that tag disappeared. If I feed this into a connect object and I make it editable, the tag is still there. If I double click, the tag is saying everything is selected. That is not what we want. Is that actually the reality of it? Maybe. There's no, I'm trying to think of a way I could validate this information. I don't know if this will work. Let's try making a matrix object. I will say clone onto an object, and the object will be a line. I'm going to say copy onto the vertexes of the line. And then I'm going to see if it allows me. Oh, can we drop in an end? Okay, I dropped in the end directly. It didn't like that selection. That's not necessarily wrong, but there is no, there is no limit selection here. So that I could not validate it that way. Those are there. Let's see. I'm losing hope that this is going to work. I'm now pushing all of those points up with this plane effector. So, that's modifying that. So I'll lessen that. So you see those are up, and I'm going to say, okay, yes, those will do that. But under the field, limit to this end selection. And I'm saying do it based on the index or based on nearest. And you see it's not affecting that. So that's making me think this method of doing a parametric series of selections, points, invert selection was not on the right thing. It wasn't on points. But now I had set it correctly. The store selection, it should be, I'll even get rid of default. It should be giving a name of ends, which this should, it is called ends, but it didn't update. You see, this didn't refresh, and this, in spite of looking at this selection tag, is not propagating through. So I think that's a dead end for that methodology. Okay, so that was just one idea. So we're gonna ditch that, and now is that. So another, can we make a, I don't know if this will work. I'm going to hit undo a few times. I want to bring that back, but we don't need any of this. So now what if we put a other tag point selection? It is now based on fields. I will feed the line itself in as a spline object. And now in theory, that's making a parametric selection along the spline. So if this was working correctly, half the points are selected, half are not. Can we see that? Let's find out. In the plane effector, I'm going to say link to this tag instead. And look at that. Half of them did move. So, so this version of the tag is working. That gave us the information we needed. And now via this line, we're just linearly going from one side to the other. So this is going to be a little bit hacky. I don't like doing things this way because it's very imprecise, but I'm going to make a curve. And if I were to remap this, you can see I can actually change where they're being mapped. So if we set this to be a linear type spline and we move both points up, and now I'm going to make a copy, and we're going to say something like this. Essentially, I'm making these as very super duper close to the end as I can. But if I go just a little bit too far, you're going to see more selections. 2 matrices are selected there because of the angle. But keep in mind, there's an inverse idea of that. And that would be if I subdivided this line more, let's say instead of 100 segments, there's 1,000. That would mean this point has to be less than 1,000th the way over, or another point would get selected and caught up in it. So just keep that type of thing in mind. But I now do have a parametric selection tag that is successfully propagating up through this matrix object. And this matrix object was just to validate if it seemed to be giving us the information or not. So now that that is working, let's give this a save just because we got a decent amount of stuff in the scene. Catenary Rope Sim. Okay, so with that in mind, can we now add a rope So a simulation rope, yes, obviously. If I hit play, that should hopefully just fall, initializes and falls. So surprising amount of lag to drop that. That's actually a thing with this computer where it's like sometimes it's like, oh, I want to run at 1,000 frames a second. Oh, wait, I'm going to run at 10 frames a second. Anyway, that is now doing that. Okay, the fixed points, there's no selection tag. Actually, if somebody from Axon's watching, here's an official request from me. A lot of the settings for the rope sim got ported over from the old rope simulation. But this is a very old style from cinema where, like, these days we don't want to set something. We want to link a selection tag to it, or put a vertex map or something like that. So right now, the rope literally does not have a setting in which we could say limit to a selection. Having said that, there is a mix animation. And so if we say pins influence 100 and we run that, you're going to see nothing is moving. And nothing is moving because everything is being forced to be linked directly to, everything's being pinned to its original position. So this wants vertex maps. So I will copy this field list, make a other vertex map, right click on the field, paste, and now we should be getting the same math. And yeah, the outsides are 100%. The inside should be 0%. So in the tag, we're now saying, I want 100% multiplied by the endpoints to say those have to be acting as if those points can't move. So let's drag in, oh wait, oh, wrong one. Drag that in. Let's see what happens. Nothing, unfortunately. Now, is this a problem with a vertex map? Is perhaps that inverted? I don't know. Let's do some more validation. In this plane, the point selection was working, but let's see if the vertex map is working. Unfortunately, I'll say this is unfortunately, the vertex map is working here, meaning that information is propagating successfully in that system, but this parametric tag does not seem to survive the transfer into this, which probably means we need to make it editable. I don't know for sure, but I bet that if we, let me just start that again, just to make sure. I bet, or our best bet is if I make that editable, everything's still here. These are all now live. And if I were to select that vertex map, you can actually see in the viewport that yes, those outer points are selected. And I didn't change anything. I just made it editable. And even that's still linked. So now if I hit play, let's make sure we're not in point mode. Oh, wait, it's still not falling. That's a bit of a surprise. Why? There's a vertex map saying how much it should influence. And we're saying it should influence it 0. Like it's all the way at the bottom. We know that for a fact. This curve is putting it at the bottom. Don't use the deformed points. Keep in mind, if I'm in point mode, it's not going to show me it moving. I have to be like not in point mode because that's showing the parameter, or it's showing me the edits I can make. Okay, so it doesn't like that. Let's try turning on force. And we'll make the force really strong. And we'll also put the vertex map there. There. Interesting. Do you see the ends seem to droop down a little bit? That's making me think that we need the inverse of this? Maybe. So, invert. Okay, interesting. Not what I was expecting. So does that mean that the other one would have worked, but we needed the invert? No, that still isn't working. Oh, wait. Okay, scale. Okay, that's back to working. So we need to invert the values, which is a influence 100%. It's the opposite of what I thought it would be. So let's hit undo. Okay. Forward, undo. Okay. So we're back to parametric vertex map. Let's re-invert that and see. Hey, okay, look, it's working parametrically. So we just have to be meticulous and figure out the steps. So now, I mean, here, now you see I was able to build a rig that could do it. And we're not even using catenary modifier here. So it's not parametric, but we do have it automatically running the simulation. Now, here's the question is, we're running this vertex map. It's a curve and this line, and it is per segment. And then we're remapping per segment. So I don't know for sure, but if we put the break spline in there, and now you see we have a break and a break, the vertex map should parametrically be updating and saying, well, that's a segment, that's a segment, that's a segment. If I play, oh dear. Oh, wait, it's animated. Don't animate. Yes, it's perpetually refreshing, which would break everything. Not working. So that's the sim doesn't want to run on the line if a break is there. Unfortunate. The only thing I can think is a connect object. When in doubt, use a connect. Let's propagate all this stuff up one layer. That should be still treated as spline, and it's going to act like the whole thing was made editable. Let's run that. Oh, interesting. The endpoints were still there. Don't need that anymore. The endpoints were still acting like they were linked, but this spline, well, I guess this, actually, this line might be what I need the connect to. That's the most important part of the connect, perhaps. Oh, okay, cool. And as soon as I did that properly, okay, we're now back to entirely parametric, and we have these ropes wanting to droop down. Boop. So that's cool. I mean, because it means we can do a lot of things like, let's double our point count, and let's make this longer. And then let's say that we're breaking a couple extra times in there. So we got these extra breaks. Everything should just refresh, and I should be able to hit play. And now parametrically, all of our lines have successfully linked, and they're dynamic, and we run simulation on them. So that's pretty cool. I dig it. Keep in mind what I said about this remap, that this curve is very important. And if you didn't know, you can right click and you can say show in a separate window. Oh, does it not work on the, oh, that sucks. Usually you can say show in a separate window, but it seems like the capsule based ones, they didn't integrate that. So we could say Control T, and now you see I do have this big one, and now I made it so big. Look at all this extra room I can see that I can do that. Maybe we could push this all the way. Like maybe it is just safe to like plop that against the wall. Let's see. I hit Control or Command T and shrink that down. Let's see if that still works. No, it doesn't. So we can't go all the way. We need it to be a hair knot. Now, like I said, I made this full screen, so I could just scoot those in like that tiniest a bit. And just doing that tiniest bit, I think, means it will work. Yeah. But one last thing to mention is I could select this point, and then if you go to this twirl down, you can see here's an actual number with the values. And I could say like, oh, it's actually 0.01, and that's like the smallest possible number. Grab this one and say that this is 0.999. That's the largest possible number without actually hitting the hitting 1 in cinema. And in theory, yeah, so now we could, have like 10,000 points on here and it would never mess up. A little meticulous, but I would be confident that this is going to work for everything we want to throw it at. So that's pretty cool. So now that we've essentially got a working rig, and I will save that. We don't need that. We don't need that. And we'll make a new one if we need that. So I'll just save that as sort of a working rig. I'll make a text spline. And let's type in cinema 4D. Boopity, boopity, boom, boom. Okay, so we got something like that. Now I could go and drop my break spline modifier into this text object. And here's what's cool is if we set this to angle mode, it's going to make angle breaks anywhere that's sharper than say 89 degrees. So you can see the sharp corner has broken. If we start lowering this down a little bit more, we can break there, and I want to lower it enough so that that also broke. So now essentially everything that's got kind of a hard edge is a broken point. Now keep in mind, we've got this gap, and the gap, we can make that gap as large or as small as we want, and we can go to 0. That's fine. There's 2 different points now making up the corner. We just left it at a default of 2 so you can actually see it in the viewport. Otherwise it looks like nothing's happening. So Now I'm going to transfer these tags up. Actually, no, I don't want to do that. I want to yoink out the line, drop this into the connect. And now, in theory, we've just transferred the rig to the text object. So now if I hit play, there's a lot more rope, but now there's something that's not in love with. Maybe it's just the rope colliding. Actually, do you know what probably is that this text is not subdivided in any sort of super clean way. So the easiest thing would be for me to throw this into the Rocket Lasso utility splines. So I could put this into the Rocket resample. And oh, is it not going to consume it unless that's in a connect? Yeah, that also, this also wants it to be in a connect, but I could say resample it, and here's what's cool. I can double click here, and now we can see how it's resampling. And right now it's a step of, yeah, it's a step of 5, and all of those are getting subdivided. So there's some points for it to work from in theory. Still parametric. I got all those subdivisions in there. Let's hit play. And now it's happy. So, well, these are colliding with each other and getting all wacky, but yeah, that is working, and we are able to kind of get this parametric rig to sample this stuff and let the rope simulation run on top of everything. There was one other version I wanted to try just out of curiosity. Let's file revert to saved. I think it's safe. Let's see if we can do this, and because we just did all this very meticulous stuff to try and get that working. One last thing I wanted to try that might be a little easier. So let's kind of start. How much from scratch? Yeah, I'm going to kind of start from here. So we've got a line, it's got some subdivisions, and we're breaking it apart into several different segments. Having done that, let's now put a catenary spline modifier. So we'll drop that after the break. And you see, this is actually kind of a fun detail, but this is actually, it automatically works per point, but there's a mode you can say, well, don't work per point, instead work per segment. And now you see them drooping the way we expected them to. So now they're pre-drooping, essentially. So then if I were to make another object, I haven't done this in a while, so forgive me if I mess up some details, but I'm gonna make this plane, and I can say, okay, plane. I wonder if this has changed, but I'm gonna do the old style. I'm gonna do the new simulation rigid body, and I'm gonna say forces follow position. I'm just gonna crank it up to 10. So essentially this doesn't want to move anymore. It's just going to, this big plane just wants to hang out there. And then we're going to put a brand new rope simulation tag on the connect. So if I play, they might bump a little bit, but yeah, well, you see the plane generally wants to stay there. Those were intersecting, so they didn't move. So now, can we, and I don't know, but can we right click, add a rigging, not rigging, simulation connector, and then it wants to connect to other objects. So if I say create and show update live, you can see all these lovely little yellow dots. And those yellow dots are now connected to the ceiling. And the ceiling we've told not to move. So now we have catenaried. And now if I hit play, you see those are holding. And now these are drooping down. They're actually going to droop down extra far because they're already pre-hung. But we could modify the original one. You can see now that those are connected up to there. So essentially this is an entirely parametric rig, a lot simpler. The only thing you have to do is click this create button to refresh it every time you modify your spline or the geometry it's connected to, just to update it. But it is now just a single button click and you can get this version going. Now, one thing I do want to check is I kind of did this little fake of follow position. I thought there was maybe a way of doing it even more so, but are we able to oops, undo. Are we able to make this not a rigid body, but make it a collider? And does that work? Can we pin to a collider? So selecting our connector again, create, and no, unfortunately we cannot. I'm hoping there's another request from Axon, is that much like we can pin to a rigid body, can we pin to a collider? Because this won't move, but we can't pin to it. Yeah, and all the settings I see here, it's not going to get better. But I thought there was a way that we could more. Actually, maybe it's if we make it cloth. Yeah, if we make it cloth, which is funny. But if we make it cloth, we can just say with pins 100%, and now Oh, and then we run the refresh. That's oh, update live. That's interesting. I'm not seeing. I guess update live means I should do it always, but I see a connection there and a connection there, but the other ones don't look like they connected, and sort of collided, sort of didn't. But based on the range, I can just scoot that up just a hair, so they're not technically intersecting. But I thought that we could pin. I mean, it seems like those corner ones are. So why aren't these pinning? Maybe you're right, but I thought it didn't have to, but maybe ropes do. Anyway, sorry, Eric in the chat said maybe they need to be connecting directly to points, and you'll see that a bunch of these are not very near points. Now, I know that if you're connecting cloth to a rigid body, it doesn't need to connect to a point. It will connect to a surface, but maybe a rope has to connect to a point. I don't know. So let's just throw on like a ton more points there. We don't honestly need many in that orientation. So I'll just throw in like a ton of points. They definitely should be in proximity to each other. And let's say create. And yes, now they did. And you can see them snapping 2 points. So you are correct that these need to be linked to points directly. But you saw they linked successfully when it was a rigid body. So yeah, it seems like if you're connecting to a soft body, you need to connect to points. If you're connecting to a rigid body, you don't need to connect directly to points. Definitely threw me off a little bit. And thanks, Eric. But so anyway, now you see that this floor is absolutely not moving at all, and these are now welded to it, but at the sacrifice of making all these subdivisions. I don't know if it truly optimizes it, but once you turn on with pins, if your influence is 100%, there's a chance it's not even like running simulation on those points. So this thing could be acting almost as a rigid body for all purposes for what we're doing, because it's not trying to apply any forces to it anymore, because its position gets 100% overridden by the pin. It just depends, is it still running the calculation and then just resetting it, or is it like, oh, I'm 100%, so I don't even need to run the calculation? That I don't know. So anyway, that is 2 completely different methods for doing this. One, we did use catenary, and the other we didn't use catenary. But in both of them, we did use break spline, and I do like the break spline modifier. So hopefully that answers that question. I'll save this file as well for reference. The catenary spline, while we're playing with the catenary spline, I'll just show off another thing it can do that I think is pretty cool. I'll open up a new scene file, and what shape do I want? It's actually the one I typically do, so I guess I'll use it again. So we'll make one of these, and we could say edge the spline, but I'm just going to use my tool, mesh the spline, so I can convert those parametrically. And I can even say exploded. So now each of these is its own little line segment. And if we make a catenary, so here's another catenary spline modifier. If I drop that on, you see all those lines will droop, which is kind of cool. And if I were to grab the original object and start rotating it, you can see I can spin this around, and those lines will be always updating and drooping down. So that's pretty fun. We could add variations, so some go down further, some go down more. We could put more bias, so there's like heavier contrast, so more small ones, more long ones. And then I can go back and start spinning this around, getting all these kind of dynamically drooping down. Not literally dynamically, but you see automatically they're mathematically drooping down. And let's reset the transform. But the one thing I want to show here is we can change the catenary's gravity from global, saying pulled down, to, I could say, local. And now if I rotate the catenary, you can see I can make the wind go in different directions. Like the gravity is going in different directions. But even more fun than that is changing it to spherical. And now you see all the lines are pushing outward from wherever this is. So I can actually drag this around and make some crazy shapes. But this is a really nice way of kind of getting those Indiana Jones lines. So let's get rid of that variation. We can go easy on the sag here, just do that. And now we can get kind of all these lines crisscrossing on top of that shape. And this would be a pretty difficult thing to do otherwise. Now I could make a sphere. And yeah, actually sphere is the same radius. So now those lines are perfectly bouncing from spot to spot to spot. And we could do more of that. You could just draw a line, like line to there, to there, to there, to there. Actually, let's do it because it's easy. Actually, I haven't done this in a while. Do I need to make it editable? I want to make I want to draw, but I want to collide with an object. I don't even know if that's possible. If we turn on snapping, I don't think it will be. Yeah, I don't even know what that's doing. It did something. But yeah, that's not snapping the way I wanted it to. After the fact, I could snap it to the surface in theory. A little tedious, but let's see if I turn that on. E for move, and now, yeah, now I am snapping the points. So I could then grow my selection, deselect that one in theory. Did that work? Do that, and then grow, deselect, move. That's the third one in theory. So now I got 3 points on there. Drag the catenary. Well, it looks like I dragged them in the wrong spot, but you can see that those lines are now, radiating out. Easier ways would be tracing them. There's got to be a way you could draw directly onto a surface. It's not coming to mind, but I feel like there's got to be a way. Anyway, let's move on to some other things. Wow, time flies. We got a half hour, but we have been tackling several questions. Let's see. I just want to make sure. All right, Demi's got another question, but I want to hit somebody else if they've got one. Stay sick asked a question earlier. But I don't know what you're addressing. Maybe you're having a different conversation. How does this compare to doing it in compositing versus C4GC? Maybe you're just having a conversation. It's all good. Let's see. Stud Frame was asking, this is something quite easy, but I wasn't able to really figure it out. Is it possible to have a line to spline be animated by speed rather than position? A line to spline be animated by speed. Oh, I think I understand. You want, okay, so I think the question, and I don't have an immediate answer, but let's say we had a circle spline, and then you've got, let's keep it simple, make a cone. We'll make a animation, a line to spline, and that is the spline. It's tangential, and tell it to aim forward on Z+. So now we've got this little cone, and the cone's going to be traveling around the spline. But this is all based on the position of the spline. So if you keyframe this, you don't know what speed that's traveling. You just know it's moving forward a certain percentage of the circle. Now, there is no setting inside of the tool that will help you do that. But with Xpresso, I think you could. So let's see if we can kind of whip it out pretty quick. So let's see if this works. If I make a circle and I'm going to output the object, and then let's search, and I want to search for the word spline. There's something called, is it just spline? Is that just a spline object? No, okay. This is like a spline data. So if I link the circle spline into the spline, you'll see I'll be able to get a certain amount of information about the spline. And one of the bits of information is the length of the spline. So I always do this. If we make a text object, drag that in, I want to output the object property of the actual, is it text? It must be the text spline. I'm going to output the length. And yeah, now you can see that this is saying how long the circle is. So if I increase this, you can see that that number is changing. So now we actually do know how long that is. So if you were so inclined, and I'm trying, where do I want the setting? I guess on the cone itself, I might add a user data. And we'll say that the user data will be a float. But we don't want it to be percentage. It's going to be a real value. Don't limit us. And let's call this speed, and it's a real value. And we even say length unit, right? Or no. It's a real value. Which one gives us the actual? I think, yeah, did we just say real? It's just not showing the CM here. Maybe, maybe not. So it's a real value, no limit, default value, I don't know, 50. So now my cone, say, okay, now I have a user data, and the user data is saying we have a speed. It's not in meter. Maybe you have to set the meters. I do want to get this right. Let's go to user data, click on the speed, degree, unit length. Yeah, see, now it says CM. Maybe I thought it used to be called metered or something. So if I say, okay, now we get CM. So now it's just informing the user better that we're talking about how many centimeters is it traveling. So this is like 1,500-ish centimeters, and how fast do we want to go? So now I'll drag in my cone, and I'll grab my speed. And the math is not immediately jumping to mind. I kind of hoped it would, but we need to say, it's speed times time for sure. So let's grab a time node, and let's grab a multiply. Nope, it's just a math node in this one. Kind of switching my brain between some capsule type stuff, some scene nodes. We're going to multiply the time, and actually, yeah, that is the time. We could also say frames, but right now it's time, which would be 0 to 1 equals 1 second. And I think it's like 0 to 1 equaling a second means a second. So now we're multiplying those. And now ultimately, so then we're going to make a duplicate of the math node. This is something that always annoyed me. If I hold down Control to make a duplicate, oh wait, did it do it this time? Maybe they changed it. But anyway, do you see that the copy is now selected? In the past, if you made a copy, the old one was selected. So I wanted to change this to divide, and what would always happen is I changed it to divide, but it turned out I was changing the old one, not the new one. I'd mess myself up all the time. So I can never remember which order I put these in. So let's say I'm going to take the overall length and divide it by the speed. And now that should be giving us some sort of percentage. Oh, and it's currently at the time of 0, so it's outputting 0. Let me go 1 frame forward. Let me try swapping those. That seems more like it. So what we're now saying, if you were to take the speed and you've gone a certain amount of time forward, how much distance have you traveled? And then we're saying, okay, of that, what percentage of the length of the spline does that represent? So I don't know for sure, but as we go forward some frames here, this number should be constantly increasing. And now that we've gone, I guess it's time. So time is equaling, is it 100 frames? That's not quite what I was expecting. Yeah, well, not quite sure. I almost never use time. I usually use frames, but let's go with it. So here, over the course of 100 frames, I've now traveled 10% of the length. Oh, I guess it may, okay, no, never mind. Those numbers might make sense because of the sheer length of it. So then, yeah, this turns into, now we just grab our align to spline tag, and I'll say what percentage have we traveled, and that's going to be whatever the output of the divide is. So now if I hit play, now that's moving forward. And is it moving? The question is it moving forward 50 centimeters over 3 seconds? I might, just for sanity, and it's easier to talk about, I'm going to change this to frame. So now it's like we're moving 50 centimeters per frame, in theory, is what's happening. And that visually looks a little more accurate. So what is one? We know that the overall length was like 1,600. And it's like, well, what is about 1/50th that? And like, I think maybe there's a math. I don't want to spend a bunch of time getting really nitty gritty here, but hopefully you see the concepts of what I did. Now we have you see the percentage is constantly changing, and I can grab my cone, which has the speed, and I can say, oh, travel 25. And then, yeah, now you see it's going half the speed. I can say go 5, and now it's traveling slower. And I can say go 500, and now it's going, super crazy fast. So boop, boop. Yeah, actually, it does look like the math's pretty good. I don't remember what the exact length is, but if we say 1,600, if I go forward a frame, you see it barely moved. It went all the way around and barely moved. So I think, yes, we are successful. I think the math is correct. So now we can just type in whatever number. What's cool is because it's all Xpresso, if this increases, it's updating correctly now. Now it's going to go the proper speed no matter what we type in. It should be constant. I guess if we were to prove this out, copy paste. If I shrink this down, yeah, you see this one's on a smaller circle, so it looks like it's traveling faster, but it's not. It's traveling 100. That one's traveling 100. It just takes longer for it to go. Where if this had been both of these just animating the percentage, when one was at the top, the other would be at the top. When it was on the left, the other would be at the left. So that would have been more of a constant type of thing. So yeah, actually, I do believe this is working. Now, super duper important. This is now a system that is all about. This is a system that is absolute, like meaning in any given moment, it knows exactly where it's supposed to be right now based on the math that went in. It is not additive. It is not saying like, well, last frame I traveled this amount, but this frame I'm traveling less. So add those together. It's not doing that. It's saying I am 20 frames in. So 20 times this distance, convert that to percentage, travel around. So what that means is you cannot keyframe this speed because you'll get crazy weird results. In fact, let me show you because it's really easy to demonstrate, I think. If I'm going to say record my animation linear, so everything's going to be linear here. I'm going to say, yes, at the beginning, you are traveling 25 frames a second. In fact, let's just hit play. If I hit play, you see it's going to be moving at a constant speed. And you're like, okay, I want that to travel for a few frames at 25. Let me hit play. And up until there, let's say, okay, it's travel from there to there at 25. So we keyframe. And then you're like, and then it's going to slow down. So then I go a couple more frames forward. And I'm going to say, okay, and eventually it's going down to 0. But watch what happens. It's going to be really, it's going to be, I'm expecting, this should be weird. I'll make that a little bit larger. So what's going to happen is that's going to travel. And then suddenly when we start keyframing it down, it rewound. But it's because we're shrinking the number down. Even though the time's increasing, we're now saying like 25 times the time. But then we're saying, well, 10 times the time. That's less. 5 times the time. That's less. And eventually we're at 0 times the time. So it doesn't matter how much time there is. We're still at 0. So this system is not compatible with keyframing because you're essentially, I'd call it impossible. You could try and counter keyframe it to make it correct. This wouldn't work for you. So let's see if we can. I'm going to save this scene file, but let's modify this to become keyframeable essentially. So let's make that for a Xpresso speed spline. Okay. So right now we have, let's see, we have to reconfigure this a decent amount. Currently, we've got a speed and we've got a time. Does that even matter? We might need that for some refreshing. We've got the divide, which we probably still need, but that's for the final. Yeah, we need that for the final value. So speed. Okay, we need another variable here. So I'm going to go into my user data and we're going to say add data. And then we're just going to call this traveled. And that is going to be a float set to length unit, no limits. And we're going to say, okay, now we have a new variable. Now, what this is going to be for us is it's constantly storing how much we've traveled. So I'm thinking, let's keep it real simple. I'll duplicate this math node. Oop, look, it did the thing. I duplicated it, but it still kept the old one selected. So you just saw it in the stream that this is where it gaslights me. Sometimes it selects it, sometimes it doesn't. That's why I've messed up so many of my Xpresso rigs. So anyway, I'm going to say, so here, this is really fun. What we're going to do is create a feedback loop. I'm going to drag traveled as an output. And what are we going to do? Well, I'm going to say, I want to take however far we've traveled, which is 0, and I want to add the speed onto it. So now it's travel plus speed. So it's going to be, are we on 50? Let's set that to the default of 50. So we're saying we're going 0 plus 50 equals 50. And then we're going to output that back into the cone again. So I'm going to update the value of traveled with that number. And that means on the next refresh, traveled equals 50. And then the speed equals 50, meaning it's now it's now traveled 100, so that equals 100. And then the next refresh, this is now 100 plus 50, 150. So we've got this feedback loop just by making, that's what I always say, just by making ourselves a little Starship Enterprise, we've made a feedback loop. And now we're going to take that final distance traveled, like whatever that is. So I guess I'll just output it as well. Drag this here. I'm going to say that is what's going to get multiplied as how much traveling we've done. Actually, right now there's the time here. We need to bypass that. I don't want it to be doing time. So we're just going to actually plug that directly in. So here's the distance traveled versus how long the spline is. That gives us a percentage. Same system as before. So now let's check out what's going on. If I hit play, you see that we're still constantly moving forward. It looks great. But now you see this number is constantly increasing. So with that constantly increasing number, that means I could do something like actually keyframe my speed. So let's go back and I'm going to say, okay, let's do the same thing. I want this thing traveling at 50. And we're going to hit play and we're going to let it travel a little bit. And then I'm going to say, yes, still 50. But then over the course of the next chunk of frames, that's going to slow down to 0. So essentially, we're just decelerating. Keep in mind, all those were linear keyframes. So now if I play, this is traveling. And then at a certain point right now, it's going to start decelerating. And then it stops exactly where it was, exactly what we wanted it to do. This is now keyframeable. We can now animate this. And then we're adding in some speed and we're getting rid of some speed. And we could even have it go reverse. I could get rid of the keyframes and say negative. And now it's going to start backing up a little bit. But you'll see there's one little problem. And that is this number is never stopping. It is always getting bigger. So if I pause and I rewind my animation, the number got bigger. It's never resetting back to 0. So this is a vital part of building some sort of feedback loop is we need a reset condition. So right now, here is where the traveled variable is getting set. So what we need to do is say, well, there's actually 2 different ways you can get a value from here. So I'm going to make a constant. So let's just search for the word constant. And there's a constant value. And there's a constant value of 0. And then we're going to make a condition. And the condition, we'll drag that out. The condition is a switch, which is going to say, well, sometimes do one value, sometimes do the other value. I'm probably going to get these backwards, but I'm going to plug in both of these as our inputs. And let's plug that to be our traveled distance. Now, what is going to make us want to be one switch or the other? Well, it's actually going to be time. So we've got our time, we've got the current frame. So we're going to need a compare. And I'm going to say, okay, compare what? Well, I'm going to say if the current frame equals 0, so if we're at the time of 0, reset traveled to 0, or whatever you want the starting value to be. I might have these, oh, it's just equal, so I think it's fine, but these might be backwards. So if I drop in switch, if I click on cone, you see we got this big old value. If I rewind to 0, you see it reset to 0. And that is thanks to switch. And I did not get them backwards somehow this time. So now we have a reset condition, meaning we can let this play and that's all good. And if I pause, if I hit rewind, it's going to reset us back to 0, exactly what we want. So now we can actually keyframe our speed. And we have always got this little updating number of how many times we've traveled, or how much distance we've traveled around the spline. I mean, of course, we could extract more data from that if we wanted to, but yeah, I think that's working quite well. Now, there's one last thing we can and should build into this rig, and that is stopping it from constantly refreshing. So watch this. If right now you see that we are at 7,550. I'm not sure when it will do it, but yeah, even right now, every single time I click, it's refreshing Cinema. But we told Xpresso every time you refresh, every single time you refresh, add that number. So I'm saying, refresh, 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 refresh. So this would be fine if you were like rendering out an animation. And even now, if I were to just hit play in the timeline, as long as I rewind and hit play, it's accurate. But as soon as I pause, I'm trying to, let's say I'm trying to work on the spaceship, but it keeps on moving every time I click on it. So keep in mind, it would render correctly, it will play back correctly, but it's not going to work when you're paused in the viewport. So, but we can compensate for that. Inside the Xpresso, the main thing, again, that's happening is this number is updating. I'm going to say, I don't want you to update all the time. I'm going to rearrange a few things here, just make it clean. Essentially, I stop as many of these from overlapping each other as I can. You see, even like that one's overlapping, so I'm going to move my time above it. and move this below. The fewer wires you have crisscrossing, the less confusion you get. And I also don't like the wires to bend backwards like that if I can avoid it. So, okay, so here's the constantly updating thing. And I'm going to say there's a really, really useful thing inside of every single Xpresso node. If you click on the input blue box here, there's something called on. And on essentially is like, it's a condition. It's always, right now it's always on. Right now it's always saying, yes, I am on, and yes, I'm always running. But we can say, no, you're not actually always running. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a duplicate of the time node. We don't actually have to make a duplicate, but I'm going to make a separate one to keep it clean. And we're going to make something called a memory node. So here's something called memory. We drag that out. And what we need to do is say the history depth is 2 and the history level is 1. So what this is essentially going to do, I've talked about this type of thing before. If we drop in, oops, my mouse is declicking on me. Frame input. Okay, so I'm now putting in the current time. Every time the frame changes, actually, it's not true. Every time there's a refresh, every single refresh, this memory node is going to be like, well, I am now taking whatever number you fed in. Meaning this memory node is essentially always one refresh behind whatever the current time is. But if the time doesn't change, that would mean, okay, let me step through. So we're at the time of 0. And that means, okay, I'm at 0 and this is nothing. It's 0 as well because there's, essentially fed no information. If I go forward 1 frame, our time is now frame 1. But the history, the memory node is saying, but I remember the previous refresh, which was 0. That means the time and the memory don't equal each other because the time changed. But as soon as I click again, if I just click in the viewport, I trigger a refresh. My time didn't change because it's still frame 1, but the memory node said, well, I'm supposed to refresh. So now the time equals 1 and the memory node refreshed to equal 1. So they didn't change. If I compared them, they are equal to each other. So what we can say is we need another compare node. So let's search for compare. We can say that when the time and the memory do not equal each other, that actually means the time has changed. Like we have successfully updated the time. If these equal each other, that means we're still at the same time, which means it should not have refreshed. So this is now a compare. This is outputting true or false. And now we're saying if the time hasn't changed, don't update. If the time does change, yes, update. And just by dropping those 3 nodes in, I've now told this only to update at certain times. And there we go. That is essentially the entire setup here. And I mean, the last that, just because we're saving this for posterity, essentially, I'm going to grab a couple things. I'm going to grab the cone, and the cone is the main one. Also the circle, and that's a text spline. Now, technically, we should delete that text spline out now that we don't need the information, which we will. But I typically will go through and like recolorize these things. Actually, I haven't done it in a while, so I'm kind of forgetting. To me, I have my own like method. I think I'm just going to use green. And so by marking these as green, I'm just like, oh, those are objects in the object manager. And then this is a tag. And I think I usually use purple to represent the tag. So that means, okay, that's a tag in the real world in the object manager. And these are actual objects in the object manager. And whenever I made like a code node, I make it like a bright blue, like a sky blue. And then text splines, I always forget them. And so I always made them bright pink. So I couldn't miss it. It's like, okay, no matter how zoomed out you are, you're always going to be like, oh, there, even from here, I can see that right there is the text spline. Because all the time it's like, oh, I don't need a text spline anymore. But watch this. If I delete that text spline, this turns yellow and it says undefined. And that means everything will break. If you have a yellow node, that means something impossible is being asked. Like Cinema is being told, Xpresso is being told, set the value in this object. But there is no object, so it can't set any value. So we have to delete that out. That's now nice and clean. Everything's colorized. We can save this as the next version. Boop. And now we hit go. And now that's constantly traveling. But here's the cool part with the change we just made. If I stop that and I start clicking around, look, it's not constantly refreshing. My value, this value here, does not refresh anymore. Unless I rewind to 0 and it does go back to 0. So now we've got a lovely, super controlled, super meticulously controlled feedback loop in which we can change the speed of this and it will always be working correctly. I mean, honestly, like all of the principles we just talked about there give you almost the entire foundation you need to like pop open like Unity or something and like start programming a game where it's like, oh, we've now got this feedback loop. We've got this variable that we can update with information. So this could be anything. This could be like hit points of the character or how far they've traveled or how much ammo is inside their gun. The condition's been met, subtract ammo. Like, oh, they've gotten hurt, subtract health. In this case, we're adding distance traveled. So, but yeah, that principle is like universally applicable for so many things. Let me check the chat, see if there are follow-up questions to this. Let's see. Yeah, little solver. Thanks, real. Cool. We got 5 minutes left, so I'm not going to take on another proper question, I think. I'm just looking for follow-ups on this one. Demi was saying that they'd probably just tackle this using a particle, but yeah, here's making it controllable. Hey, Maddie, I just literally said that we have 5 minutes left. And essentially we just wrapped up one of the questions, and it doesn't look like there's any follow-ups on here. So hopefully the person who asked the question is still here. I know we went straight into Xpresso, but hopefully we went slow enough in there. And you saw, it's like, even now, if you pop this open, you'd be like, oh my goodness, like what's even happening like in the setup. But as you build it step by step, you're just like, oh, we just needed like 3 nodes. It's like, oh wait, we need a condition. So then we added 2 more. And it's like, oh wait, we need to, switch it. So we built a switch setup here. So, as you build these things step by step, things are, hopefully not too crazy. That's why it's really easy to me. It's like really easy to impress people, like with Xpresso or with scene nodes, where it's like, oh, I can go and terrify somebody with like all the math that's inside of these things. But it's like when you're actually sitting there working on it, and in your head you've built it like little brick by brick by brick by brick, like it's not intimidating. But if I just pop this open and say, what, quick, tell me, what did this do? Like, you'd be like, wait, I don't know. That's really crazy and scary. So keep in mind, Xpresso, not so scary. Just do it step by step. Yeah, so we got both versions of that, the simple one and then the feedback loop one. Let's see. Demi, I don't think we have time to... yeah, Demi, I just explained. I colorized all of them to for my own notation. I color tag nodes purple, just so I know that. It's like, oh, that's referencing the tag. So later, if I go in here, I'm like, oh, I need to find where's my, like, align the spline. It's like, well, I know it's a tag. I'm like, oh, there's my purple one. That's my align the spline, just because I colored it. And I made all these green because those are objects in the object manager. Just my own personal methodology. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about that. I'm hoping, like I said, I've got a tutorial I'm working on. I hope to get that done. I'm also trying to get the last couple capsules that Rocket Lasso made for Maxon completed. There are 3 more of them left to ship. They're all pretty much done. They just need to be boxed up and packaged and get ready to ship. And then of course Maxon's got their own timeline for when they actually come out. And then we're working hard on some new plugins, which is exciting. And I also maybe hoping to get some tutorials going, kind of explaining all of the capsules now that they are here inside of C4D's interface directly, and people can use them. Like, we could just spend an entire live stream just talking about the branch spline modifier, because I think it's so powerful and so much fun to use. So yeah, and we could spend entire live streams just like talking about these. So right now, that's my backup plan, is if for some reason some people don't have questions and I need to do it, it's like, okay, well, we're just going to open up the next capsule that we haven't talked about yet, and just start walking through like cool things that you can make with it, because they're really powerful, especially branch spline. And I love the electric spline modifier, but the other ones all do great things too. And yeah, we got to talk about partition, because partition is really great. You can build like an entire, like a nice simple procedural city using partition modifier, like very, very quickly. Demi, those are all, and actually I will spend a second to explain. All of these are scene nodes, and of course scene nodes are made out of C++, but all of these are scene nodes. And if you want to be crazy, technically you can make this, and you could right click and say, where is it? There's a edit asset as group. And look, you can actually go inside of all of the Rocket Lasso nodes. So it's like, oh, that doesn't seem so bad. But it's like, well, there's an awful lot of settings there. So as we start moving inside, now I've gone inside there, and now you can see like this wall of nodes. But then you can see inside of here, if we go inside, like more, more nodes unrelated. And then here we can go inside here, and now look inside here, more nodes. And let's see, were there any other groups in this one? There might be, more groups, and you could be zooming in and zooming in. Yeah, like angle random value, go inside, and now there's like a little math node going on here. So you can see that we're inside a node, inside a node, inside a node, inside a node, just to make the branch spline modifier. But ultimately, the point's supposed to be that you don't have to worry about any of that. You can just pop it open, use the final branch spline modifier, and it's going to just make magical things for you. Now, important to note is that yes, all of these capsules are awesome. We put a lot of work into them. They do really powerful things. And in theory, a lot of these could have just ended up being Rocket Lasso plugins. So I'm very happy that these are all available to everybody with a C4D subscription now, if you're in 25.2. Now, keep in mind, these are unrelated. These are completely distinct from our proper Rocket Lasso plugins. Our proper Rocket Lasso plugins live in the extensions dropdown, and these are things that you manually install. So those are separate. Those are not what got given. Maxon doesn't have those now built in. Our plugins weren't built in. We got hired by Maxon to make like nodes, to make node capsules, which in some ways are as good as plugins and like add-ons to Cinema, but they're fully integrated now, which is exciting. But anyway, yep, that ate up the last of our time. We did quite well on that. The time really super duper flies by, and so does the year as well, which is its own kind of problem. But I think I'm going to wrap that one up from here. I'm going to play the Voxel Mesher commercial just for fun and then run the credits. Everybody who is supporting on Patreon, thank you so much. It really helps keep these live streams going and do tutorials. So if you want to support, you can get access to the scene files. And I'm hoping to get more stuff going on Patreon as we continue moving forward. And I've got all the names and the credits here. So again, thank you, everybody. But that's going to wrap this one up. Thank you, and I'll see you next week for episode 3. Bye-bye, everybody.